Hi, welcome to Media Faith Culture. Today we're going to look at faith. You know, if all I ever do in my conversations is we talk about things like sexuality, self-injury, and violence, I've done a real disservice, because the real question is this: now what? What do we do with this? Where do we move towards hope and healing in our families, in our youth groups, in our churches? Marv Penner, a good friend of mine, says this. He says at a conference from Today's Teens a few years ago, "We have done a wonderful job of creating an environment where we can invite kids into an adolescent faith that sustains them well in their teenage years. But we've done an abysmal job of inviting kids into a faith that will sustain them into adulthood. That we've got a flash in the pan spirituality that we're inviting kids to where they thrive spiritually during high school and then drop off the map the day they graduate." You know, statistics are terrifying. In the book Goodbye Generation by David Soller, he says that in the last 2 decades, the North American church has only kept 4% of all the children and youth that have attended church. And now says only 10% of teens who attend church camps and conventions, those used to be our leaders of the next generation, now actually attend church. You know, the real question is, what do we do with this? I believe one of the foundational things we need to start doing, as the church, is we need to listen. We need to listen to our students, but I think how we also need to work on this is the idea of worldview. I don't believe our students graduate high school having a biblical worldview. You know, Dallas Willard, one of my favorite authors, says this: "We can become like Christ." I change it. We can get a biblical worldview by practicing the types of activities that he engaged in. 5 quick things I want to look at that we can do as modeling as parents, but we also have to do as individuals as well. A, solitude and silence. The idea of being quiet and being alone. I bet most of you listening have never been quiet in your life for more than 5 minutes. You know, it's so important to spend time just thinking on God and spend time just thinking about life. We actually put things around us that stop that. Music, media, family, television, and the list goes on. Number 2 is money. We live in such an incredible materialistic society where everything's run on money. And the question is, what do you do with your money? It says in Matthew, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Where's your treasure? If I took 1 week and followed you around, if I followed your money, I'd usually see where your heart is as well. Service to others. The idea is this: the world does not revolve around you and me. When our churches become about just you and me, they should close their doors. We got to be looking outside of just ourselves. And there are thousands of organizations in this country you can get involved with in so many different areas. Worship. We still think that worship equals music. Music is one way we worship God, but you worship God with everything you do on any given day. And lastly is prayer, fasting, and study. Prayer. Do we really need to walk through the thousands of things we could pray about? Everything from our countries we live in, the countries we come from, praying for our troops, praying for the First Nations people in this country. There are thousands of things you could pray for every day of your life. Fasting. You know, I read Isaiah 58, and it's not just about giving up food, it's about breaking the chains of social injustice. And lastly, study. You know, what scares me is that 80% of Christians only read their Bible once a week when the pastor says, turn to. You know, if I came to any environment and I said, "Hey, I'm Brett, I'm a football player," somebody would say to me, "Oh, cool, where do you play football?" If I said, "Oh, I don't play football," you'd look at me and say, "Dude, you're not a football player then." You know, if all these things we just quickly talked about, solitude and silence, simple and sacrificial living, which is money, service, worship, and prayer, fasting, and study, if these don't mean anything to you, then the hard question is this: do you actually know Jesus of Nazareth, or do you know church structure and religion? I honestly don't care if my kids Zoe and Ben ever meet church structure and religion. How to look, how to act, how to talk, I don't care. I want them to actually meet Jesus himself. Lots of conversations on this can be found online. Just Google spiritual disciplines. Read any books by people like Richard Foster and Dallas Willard. Lots of other information can be found on my resource site, JesusCanada.com. And once again, my website is BrettUllman.com.